Oh man, Canadians could be on the hook for up to $30 billion that were given out to ineligible people or businesses throughout the pandemic, with many programs like the CRB, the CERB, as well as the ones for businesses like the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. At least that's what the Auditor General said today in a brand new report that we're going to take a look at. Since this report was released just yesterday, there have been more calls to ramp up the efforts to get that money back from Canadians, and it's leaving many Canadians across the country worried that they could get a letter in the mail saying, hey, you owe money, signed by the CRA. So let's talk about the details of this report, the absolute craziness that's going on in the House of Commons right now as a result of it, as well as whether or not you could be on the hook either directly or indirectly for this $30 billion. So let's get right into it. This is the report we're talking about. And by the way, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can keep on getting Canadian updates just like this one. This is the report written by the Auditor General. If you're not familiar with the Auditor General, it's an independent body in office that does a whole bunch of reports to determine what is actually happening within the government. And it is nonpartisan, meaning it doesn't sort of report to any political party, the Liberals, the NDP, the Conservatives. It doesn't have any political leaning, and it's supposed to be totally neutral so that parliamentarians can use what's written in these reports to actually make changes to what they're doing in terms of different laws and policies that they're trying to pass. Now, the current Auditor General was appointed by the current Liberal government. We'll get into why that's important in a little bit later. And I figured instead of reading through this, let's let you hear exactly what the Auditor General had to say for herself in a recent clip.
Overall, we found that the Canada Revenue Agency and Employment and Social Development Canada effectively delivered COVID-19 programs to provide quick financial relief to individuals and employers affected by the pandemic. The pandemic prompted the creation and delivery of income support programs never seen before in Canada. Many were up and running in a matter of weeks, where normally it would have taken months or even years. Though government organizations knew in 2020 that they would need to undertake significant post-payment work down the road, they have not adjusted their resources or plans to deal with the long-term effects of vast income support programs that were rolled out in record time. Billions of dollars have gone or may have gone to ineligible recipients. To preserve the integrity and fairness of Canada's tax system, the government is required under current legislation to take action.
So the clip starts by praising the rollout speed, saying, hey, people did need supports at the beginning of the pandemic and we got them out in record time, faster than politicians typically move, right? But what she did point out is that because we were trying to get these benefits out so quickly, we decided to use post-verification instead of pre-verification. Pre-verification being, hey, the government already has the info before you get the benefit as to whether or not you're eligible. Post-verification being, hey, we trust you, apply for the benefit, and then we'll check after the fact if you were eligible or not. That's the route they went so that they could get money out more quickly. But last year when this same Auditor General had a preliminary report for this, she said, hey, CRA, you're gonna have to amp up the amount of people that are on your staff to be able to go out and do so much post-verification, taking a look at people, auditing both individuals and businesses to try to get the money back that shouldn't have gone out in the first place. But in this report, the Auditor General says that they haven't done that and they actually don't have the resources to be able to go after all of these people in the way that they might want to. And this is where things start to get a little bit crazy, because yesterday in the House of Commons during question period, where ministers can ask direct questions of other ministers and they have to provide a response, well, the Conservative government was questioning the Minister for National Revenue. This is Diane Labouthier. She's the one who's pretty much in charge of the CRA, and things get a little interesting here. Take a look.
Canadians deserve to know that there was no control when the money was going out, and now they learn that there's no control or accountability for taxpayers to get that money back. I'll ask again, how do Canadians trust them?
Mr. Speaker, the CRA does not agree with the Auditor General's calculation with regard to ineligible recipients to the wage subsidies. The CRA's calculations indicate that the people were highly compliant and that the Auditor General's figures were exaggerated. It's not her fault because we all know that she was pressed by the opposition to produce this report. Political games must not lead us to forget that the wage subsidy saved the economy and many people.
First of all, it's important to note that the Conservatives did vote in favor of the bill that brought the CERB as well as the wage subsidy into existence. It was actually kind of historic. All the politicians came together, put aside their partisan issues, and voted this through. So it's important to note that the Conservatives did vote in favor of this bill in the first place. But then you get into the response of Diane Labouthier, the Minister for National Revenue, who sort of unexpectedly says, hey, the CRA, we don't agree with the numbers used here by the Auditor General. And in fact, we think that the Auditor General might have used inflated numbers here. And in fact, the whole report that the Auditor General did was only because the Conservative Party was pressuring the Auditor General to make a report like this. And this might not sound like a big deal, but it really is. It's important that the Auditor General is independent and provides just facts and research and analysis to parliamentarians so that they can make the right decisions going forward. And this Minister of National Revenue, Diane Labouthier, is saying, well, we don't trust that Auditor General because she only put out the report because the Conservatives were pressuring her to do so.
The Auditor General is an incredibly critical part of our democracy. And so when an individual calls the Auditor General's integrity into question, which happened just now in this House, is an attack on our democracy. Simply, her only offense was not supporting and endorsing liberal waste. Will the minister apologize?
While our colleagues opposite were talking about waste, on this side of the House, we can say that we saved lives. I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not going to apologize for a government that saved lives. And what's worse, the opposition is willing to play petty politics at the expense of children. It's shameful.
Did you hear the same thing that I did? I heard a question that was asked saying, like, why did you question the Auditor General? And then we have the minister saying, well, I'm not going to apologize for saving lives by having this program in the first place. And it's shameful that the Conservatives are making political games out of children's lives. I'm not entirely sure how all of that connects. It seems like she's a little lost here. That's just my take.
The report does not accuse the opposition of having pressured the Auditor General. To hide her own incompetence, the Minister of National Revenue today has questioned the integrity of the Auditor General of Canada in her report on pandemic spending. She should apologize. Will she? Right now, yes or no? We have worked very hard to ensure that people who got COVID benefits were eligible. And we have a strategy of auditing and cost recovery. And this report simply confirms that our estimates were correct.
So she goes from questioning the Auditor General's report, saying she used inflated numbers just because she was pressured by the Conservatives, and then somehow gets to the point where she says, hey, this report confirms that all the CRA's numbers, we were correct all along. It's all a little confusing. I'm not sure I follow entirely. But matters get even worse when you consider that it's the average Canadian that could be on the hook for this, either through direct payments in some cases or through our tax dollars indirectly, right? Especially given that another section of this report found that most of the abuse likely came from big business rather than individual Canadians. Take a look at this.
Throughout the pandemic, what we saw is that the government tried to adjust and add some additional prepayment controls and made modifications to the programs linked to individuals, but really missed those opportunities when it came to the business support. What we found is that even though the program kept getting extended for the wage subsidy, there was no addition of prepayment controls, which would have minimized the need for rather lengthy and complex post-payment work related to businesses.
If you remember back to when this was all going on, you might remember that the CERB, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, transitioned around September of 2020 into a different program called the CRB, or the Canada Recovery Benefit. Now, the original CERB you just had to say, yes, I qualify for the money, and you got the money. The CRB, you had to go through some individual qualification steps to be able to get that money. They made it harder for individuals to get pandemic support, and made it more likely that they had to pass all these verification steps. But they didn't make those same changes when it came to the businesses and the Canada Wage Subsidy, or the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, CEWS. There's so many acronyms. But what the Auditor General is saying, well, you made it harder for Canadians to commit fraud, but you didn't make those same changes on the business level, so it allowed businesses to get far more for far longer.
When it comes to the businesses, there was very little information that was collected on a monthly basis. And so without post-payment verification, it would be almost impossible to know the ability to recover or not, or even to identify with greater certainty what went to ineligible businesses, which is why much more rigorous post-payment work is needed from the government.
So due to this lack of information, the CRA might not have enough information to be able to determine which businesses applied fraudulently just based off of the information they have now. And if they were to do post-verification for all of these businesses, go after them now, well, the CRA would need to increase their funding to hire far more people so that they'd have the manpower to actually go and audit all of these businesses. Now, when it comes to individual recipients and whether or not you need to be worried about the government coming after you for repayment, well, things remain a little bit unclear.
If the government wanted to waive payment obligations for reasons of empathy, they should say so. A lot of the people who receive these benefits are some of the lowest income people in Canada. Some are ineligible because they didn't even have $5,000 in income, the threshold, according to your report. So if they were to make that argument, what would your take be on that?
I'm not the one who sets law or makes those kind of policy decisions, but I absolutely think it would be a reasonable approach. But I encourage them to be clear with Canadians. Right? I think one of the greatest things about our country is you can expect fairness and transparency, and I'm just asking the government to be clear with its decisions and its approaches to Canadians. Right now, the legislation would require them to follow up with every individual and business that is ineligible.
So the way the laws are currently written, every single person who could potentially be ineligible needs to be investigated by the CRA. And in order for this to change, the Liberal government would have to write a new bill in order to change the language, or maybe amend that bill to make it so that they can forgive certain individuals. But in either side, either the NDP or the Conservatives, the two critics of the Liberal government, well, they say that the main thing they need is an actual plan from the government on what they're going to do.
The rules that we have today have an expectation that the government would pursue individuals that received improper money. But if the government wishes to take a different approach, it should be completely transparent. I think what the Auditor General's report highlights is it is now incumbent upon the government to bring forward a plan on how they intend to examine the $30 billion or $32 billion at minimum that appears to have been improperly paid out or improperly received.
I think that when there's cases of fraud, the government should use the full power of the law to make sure those that committed fraud are brought to justice and that there is repayment. We have no tolerance at all for fraud or fraudulent activities, and that's something that the government should use the full power of the law to make sure that we're holding these folks to account. I also think they should, in particular, go after the big fish. We know that large corporations also inappropriately use funds, and that's where there should be a lot of focus. But anyone that's committed fraud should absolutely be brought to justice, and that's deeply problematic.
So as it stands right now, anyone who received money fraudulently, be them low-income individuals in Canada or big businesses who abused the wage subsidy, well, they should be expecting the CRA to knock on their door, but we don't know when. It could be over the next couple of months, or it could be 3 years from now, because they just don't have the staff in order to audit all of these people. That is, unless the Liberals sort of pass legislation saying, hey, we're going to forgive all people that fit into this special criteria. But no matter what they do, I don't think Canadians are going to be too pleased. Some people who didn't apply, if this is forgiven, would be frustrated that they didn't get this extra money. And even if this is all forgiven, people might say, well, there goes $30 billion of taxpayer money that the Canadian government could have avoided having to pay. But I'm curious what you think about all of this. Do you think that the CRA's numbers are correct or the Auditor General's numbers are correct and that whole controversy? Do you think that we should go down the road of payment amnesty or forgiving people for this money? Or do you think we should just go after the big businesses? There's going to be a lot of different opinions here, and I want to hear from you. Leave a comment down below this video. I read every single one and I try to get back to as many as I possibly can. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel to keep on getting Canadian updates just like this one. And with all that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. Really hope this video's helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.